Week 1 at the tight end position wasn't good at all. Week 2, a little bit better. But there's a lot of under the radar guys right now that you could start if your stud is struggling. So let's take a look at who you could potentially run out in week 3. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? At the tight end position right now, there are some studs that are just struggling, or some guys that you might have drafted a little bit on the earlier side that aren't getting it done. But that's okay, because there are a few under the radar guys that you could potentially still grab off your waivers and utilize until your stud comes around. Or who knows, maybe these under the radar guys end up taking us through the entire season. But hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new here, and let's jump right into Thursday Night Football. The Giants and the 49ers will bring us a matchup of two of the more elite tight end options over the last several years. And Darren Waller continues to be really the number one guy in an offense that isn't close to being number one in the league. The problem is that they've been so inconsistent. Daniel Jones has been so bad. The offense as a whole, except for the last 2 quarters that they have played, have been absolutely terrible. And then now this is a absolutely terrible matchup. But Darren Waller, I'm still going to list as a safe play because he should still get the most targets on this team. And one thing about going up against San Francisco, you're going to have to get rid of the ball quickly. You're not going to be able to hold it for that long. And Darren Waller will probably be the guy that's going to see the bulk of those targets come Thursday night. Now, I would like to say this is George Kittle breakout week, and potentially it could be, but Brandon Ayuk had his week in week 1. Deebo Samuel wasn't too bad last week. Jauan Jennings, he got into the mix. The good news is, if we have to look for a silver lining, is that Christian McCaffrey hasn't done anything in the passing game. He's really only being utilized on the ground right now. So if you take Christian McCaffrey out of the equation, George Kittle isn't having to compete with him for targets, and that's great. Now, the targets haven't been there as of yet, but my hope is, fingers crossed, that one of these weeks will be George Kittle week, and then after that, it will be full steam ahead. For the Colts and the Ravens, Kylen Granson is up and coming right now, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen with him over the next several weeks. The Indianapolis Colts are really utilizing the intermediate part of the field, targets that are 0 to 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. And guys like Kylen Granson, those type of tight ends, are going to feast in that type of area. So we'll see if they continue to look his way. A lot of his value right now is probably based on touchdowns, but if he can start to get a few more targets here and there, separate himself from the other tight ends on the roster, and really hone in on being the guy for either Anthony Richardson, if he's able to play this week, or Gardner Minshew, we could definitely see some bigger weeks ahead. Last week I compared Mark Andrews to Travis Kelce. When you look at how the offense flowed, you could tell that missing their big man at the tight end position really messed that up. And in week 1, the Ravens didn't look great on offense. But then last week, Mark Andrews is back. He has a big game, and the offense looks a whole lot better. Now they're heading into week 3, going up against a Colts defense that is ranked 29th against the pass. And for that reason right there, my underdog pick'em to play this week is going to be Mark Andrews over 51.5 receiving yards. The Colts create some pressure. They do a good job at stopping the run, but they haven't been great against the pass yet this season. And Mark Andrews is Lamar Jackson's favorite target. OBJ's a little banged up right now. And other than really Zay Flowers, I don't think that you look at the Baltimore Ravens and say, we trust this guy or that guy. No, the guy to trust right now is Mark Andrews. If you want to play along with this pick'em or any other ones that we talk about on the channel, you got to make sure that you head on over to underdog.com or download the app. Use code word headliners when you sign up. They're going to price match your deposit up to $100, and you're going to get a special headliner pick'em that you can play that's almost guaranteed to hit this week. So make sure that you go get signed up right away. After getting blanked in week 1, Chigiooko finally showed up last week, even though it wasn't a whole lot. But unfortunately, he's going to be getting a very tough Browns defense here in week 3. So unfortunately, he's a guy that is still going to be a sit for me. We'll keep an eye on it, but as of right now, he probably should just be on waivers. Logic would tell you you that now that Nick Chubb is going to be out for the rest of the year, that we might see a little bit of an increase in the passing game and some volume in that area that maybe we hadn't seen in the past. And because of that, the hope is that David Njoku would be on the other end of that. But you still have Elijah Moore, you still have Donovan Peoples-Jones, and you still have Amari Cooper. Now, David Njoku didn't have a bad week last week. Unfortunately, a fumble took some points away, and he didn't end up finishing as high as we would have liked. So keep an eye on his potential volume as we move forward. Tennessee's defense hasn't been great against tight ends to start the year, hasn't been bad yet either. Really, if I'm looking at David Njoku, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for a higher ceiling, but realistically, I'm hoping for like 5 receptions and 50 yards. Atlanta and Detroit should be an excellent game to watch this weekend. And I already made it my Manscaped must-watch matchup back in the running back video, so I can't do it again here. But we've got a battle of 2 really young tight ends. Unfortunately, we're on different ends of the spectrum right now because Kyle Pitts is darn near close to being dropped by a lot of fantasy owners. And I get it. He's looked terrible. The passing offense hasn't been what a lot of probably fantasy owners had hoped for in Atlanta through the first 2 weeks. But now they're going to be getting a Detroit defense that is absolutely banged up. You're missing guys on the defensive line. CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to be done for basically the entire season at this point. It's really unfortunate that they're dealing with those injuries, but it could end up opening the door for a big week from Kyle Pitts. Now, if you're a Kyle Pitts owner and you're watching this right now, you're probably shaking your head and rolling your eyes, and I get it and I understand, but I'm giving him another chance because if there is a matchup where he's going to have a big day, it would be in this matchup against Detroit. So I'm going to go back to him as a start again this week, but I'm telling you right now, Kyle Pitts, if you let us down again, the leash at that point, we're going to take it off and we're kicking you out to the curb. Sam Laporta is actually off to an historic start, and per NFL.com, he is the first tight end in NFL history to have 5 receptions in his first 2 games. That's crazy to think about, right? Now, the volume isn't anything that we've been super excited about. Sam Laporta has been a guy that if you started him, you've got enough points that you aren't angry about it, but you're probably not happy about it either. And it may continue to go that way. But seeing as though we're going to be missing David Montgomery, so maybe Jahmyr Gibbs takes on a little bit of a larger role in the run game and doesn't see as many targets. Amon-Ra St. Brown is beat up right now. Sam Laporta going up against this defense that's been pretty good against the pass is going to make his money in the red zone this week. I'm looking for Sam Laporta to score his first career touchdown going up against Atlanta because that's where Atlanta has been a little bit deficient against the tight ends. Maybe not a ton of yards. If we can get 5 receptions, 50, 45 yards somewhere in that area, that's fine. But give me the touchdown. For the Saints and the Packers, I am going to list Taysom Hill as a medium risk start this week. Now, if you've been here for a while, you know how much I hate the fact that Taysom Hill is listed as a tight end on fantasy platforms, because Taysom Hill doesn't play tight end. But considering the injuries in their backfield right now, Alvin Kamara suspended another game. Kendre Miller hasn't played yet because he's banged up. Jamal Williams is now banged up. Taysom Hill saw quite a few carries last week. So if you're looking for a shot in the dark this week, I can almost guarantee you that Taysom Hill should see at least 5 carries. Now, if he doesn't score a touchdown, it's not going to matter. But if you can get us 5 carries with Taysom Hill, there's a chance that at least he could give us some potential for high-end tight end 2 numbers or low-end tight end 1 numbers. And if he were to score, you're probably looking at a guy that's middle of the road or high-end tight end 1. You know, again, how much I hate recommending Taysom Hill at tight end. But this week, given the situation, you could do a lot worse. The Saints defense has been pretty good against the pass so far this season, and Luke Musgrave is a guy that just hasn't gotten the target share that we would have liked. He's running a ton of routes. He's always running routes, it seems like. He's one of the highest route percentages on the Green Bay Packers, but he's just not being looked at enough. And you couple that with the fact that this Saints defense has been very tough against tight ends so far to start the year. For Luke Musgrave this week, I'm going to actually end up listing him as a very risky start, and I'm probably looking for another option to go with. In fact, I probably go with Taysom Hill over Luke Musgrave, as much as I hate that. This would be the perfect match for Dalton Schultz if it weren't for the fact that Robert Woods, or Bobby Trees as we call him around here, has really been taking all of the targets that were meant for Dalton Schultz. And it's really unfortunate because Schultz was kind of looked at as being the potential safety blanket, the guy that CJ Stroud was going to look to when he needed to get rid of the ball, or the guy that he just could rely on when the play was breaking down. But that hasn't been the case. It has 100% been Robert Woods in that part of the field. Nico Collins is the wide receiver 1. Robert Woods is like the wide receiver 2, 3, the PPR option that's safe, that's getting dump offs. And then Tank Dell he's starting to make his way into the mix as well. And unfortunately, even though this is a really good matchup for Dalton Schultz, there's just not enough targets to go around right now where I feel confident in trying to roll him out there. The ceiling is just not high enough for me. Evan Engram is going to be a plus start for me this week. This is a guy that continues to find his way onto the field, even with the 3 wide receivers that they have in the mix. They're using him in a lot of 12 personnel, or they're just keeping him out there and rolling him into the slot. They've put him out wide a little bit. They've gotten really creative with Evan Engram, and he continues to stay on the field a majority of the time. He's not doing a whole lot of high upside performances right now, but he's averaging 8 points, which over the first 2 weeks of the season has helped him be a tight end 1 each of those first 2 weeks. And given this matchup, I do believe that Evan Engram could definitely have another safe day for us as well. The Broncos and the Dolphins actually bring us 2 really good tight end matchups with 2 tight ends that aren't really that good. Adam Troutman, I mean, I don't really know what to say about him at this point. You've got 85 wide receivers there that it feels like is getting targets. Troutman's really being used to block. He is running some routes. He's getting a few targets here and there, but he's not fantasy viable. When you look at a guy like Durham Smythe, this is another guy that he is getting a few targets, and he's in a much better offense. So the probability of him scoring is going to be there. But when you've got Tyreek Hill and you've got Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert's coming off the week that he had, it's just not really worth running Smythe out there. However, I will say this. If for some reason Jalen Waddle were to miss this week, Durham Smythe is going to end up going to a yellow risk start for me. So if you're out there scrambling at the tight end position and Jalen Waddle is ruled out, Smythe is a guy to look at. However, I'd rather do him in like DFS and like some sort of a GPP tournament where you're trying to stand out. Putting him in your redraft league is probably not something that I'm super comfortable with. The Chargers and the Vikings should bring us another pass-heavy performance, which should be good for the tight ends. Mainly TJ Hawkinson, but unfortunately it still isn't great for guys like Gerald Everett and Donald Parham, because both of those guys are seeing equal cuts on the field, and they're maybe seeing 3 to 4 targets a week. They're not big targets. They're not putting up big performances. You've got Mike Williams, you've got Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson, Joshua Palmer, and who knows, maybe Austin Eckler gets back sooner rather than later. Now, Eckler being out of the equation does help the tight ends a little bit, but these 2 tight ends are solely based on touchdowns. If they score a touchdown, they're a start. If they don't score a touchdown, they're not going to do enough for you. There's some other guys out there that I would rather risk it with than try to go with either of these 2 guys and hope that they get enough volume outside of the other weapons that they have there. TJ Hawkinson continues to be one of the most reliable tight ends in all of football. The dude gets a ton of targets. He's looked at in the red zone. He's picking up yards right now. He's got weapons around him to help draw them away, but it's Justin Jefferson and then it's TJ Hawkinson in that order. Jordan Addison is still getting some looks. KJ Osborne is still getting some looks, but Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson probably should be the tight end 2 behind Travis Kelce every single week right now. The tight end whisperer has struck again, and I don't want to take a victory lap this early in the season, but I wrote about Hunter Henry in our draft guide. I did multiple videos on him, and I told everybody that I was going to put him inside my top 12 tight ends for the season. Hunter Henry in week 1, tight end 1. Hunter Henry in week 2, tight end 2. Hunter Henry is off to a fantastic start. He's one of Mac Jones' most trusted weapons. Now, this is a type of matchup that you look at and you say, is Hunter Henry going to still get at it this week? When you watch the Jets defense on the field, they look dominant. But then when you look at them on paper, you realize they're actually giving up quite a bit of yards. And they're ranked 26 against tight ends right now in terms of fantasy points. So if there is an option for Hunter Henry to score again this week, it would be in this matchup. Also, when you take a look at the matchup and knowing that Mac Jones might have a little bit more pressure, that the wide receivers are going to be covered like crazy, you're going to be getting it out to one of our most trusted weapons. So, yep. Hook me in again for another Hunter Henry week. With Zach Wilson, I do think Tyler Conklin will be a guy that we continue to keep an eye on. But in this matchup, it's just not one that I'm ready to bank on. He wasn't really utilized all that much last week. When you take a look at the numbers with him and Zach Wilson, I do think if they get into the red zone, he's got a little potential there. But without a touchdown, he's not getting enough volume for us to consider starting him right now. Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid are a very unique perspective on the tight end position right now, because even though both are tight ends, both are being utilized and on the field at the same time, and they're not even really running 12 personnel because Dalton Kincaid is playing out in the slot. Right now, in between the 20s, Dalton Kincaid is the guy. If you want to bank on somebody to get you the yards and get you the receptions, you're banking on Dalton Kincaid. However, Dawson Knox is going to be the guy with the higher red zone upside and the better touchdown upside, because when they get down near the goal line, Josh Allen is looking to Dawson Knox. He scored last week, and he had another target that he almost hauled in for a touchdown as well. Again, when you get down to the goal line for those touchdowns, Knox is a guy that if he scores, he's a top 12 option at the position. Unfortunately, Dalton Kincaid is taking a lot of targets in between the 20s, which makes it really difficult to start Knox right now. This is also a matchup where both defenses are inside the top 10 of fewest fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So Washington's been really good against tight ends. So Dawson Knox, I'm not really on board with him this week. He's closer to red than he is to green for me. Dalton Kincaid could still be a guy, though, that gets you enough targets to kind of be right around that tight end 12 spot. Logan Thomas is going to be in red for me this week because as of this recording, he's still in the concussion protocol, and this is a tougher matchup. While I would be interested in going back to Logan Thomas in future weeks, given the matchup and given the fact that he's still in the protocol right now, I'm going to go ahead and skip on him this week and we'll look elsewhere. Hayden Hurst had a really good week 1 performance, and then he had a really bad week 2 performance. Now, could he have a really good week 3 performance? It's absolutely an option. And that's why I have him as a medium risk right now, because he's going to carry that risk all season long. This Carolina Panthers offense, it's not great, and it's going to get better. But as of right now, I'm just not banking on them being consistent enough that I know that Hayden Hurst is going to be a full-fledged plug-and-play tight end every single week. Now, he's got the good matchup this week, and if Carolina were smart, which I do believe that coaching staff is, they would try to utilize him a little bit more. Maybe last week was just the matchup. Maybe New Orleans is just going to be that good against tight ends. If he bounces back this week, I think it helps us read into what the position is looking like for Carolina a lot better. And I've only got one tight end listed for the Seahawks right now, and you could probably list 2 or 3 of them, but it really makes no sense because they're not being utilized that much. They're going to get a few catches here and there, but none of them really have any type of fantasy upside for you. Dallas and Arizona will bring me my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Head on over to manscaped.com and use code word headliners. You're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. And I'm really looking forward to this matchup because I think this is the breakout performance for Jake Ferguson. I know I wasn't super high on him coming into the season. And last week, even though he scored, he still isn't seeing a ton of volume. But now going up against Arizona, this is Jake Ferguson week. Arizona's ranked bottom 3rd in the NFL in terms of passing yards and in terms of points allowed to the tight end position. So this is absolutely building up to be a week where Jake Ferguson can go off. Touchdown upside is there. Volume upside is there. Jake Ferguson likely will be a top 10 tight end for me this week. And even though Zach Ertz doesn't hold a ton of upside, he's got 19 targets over his first 2 games of the season. He had 6 receptions last week. We saw a little bit of his uptick in his yards as well. He's not the most glamorous tight end. He's not even the best tight end to win you a week. But he is one of the best tight ends to not lose you a week either. It's the same old song and dance for the Chicago Bears. Offensive line can't block, bland play calling. It's leading to Justin Fields pushing himself, making mistakes, trying to do too much. This offense just continues to be in shambles. If we could see a little bit more consistency out of it, Cole Kmet would become a safer play for you. Heck, Justin Fields still loves looking his way, even with DJ Moore being there. But we need to find some consistency with that offense, and I just don't know when that's going to happen. So if you're starting Cole Kmet, really, you're hoping for a touchdown. And if you're not getting it, then you're just keeping your fingers crossed that your opponent's tight end does worse that week. Travis Kelce had a good first game back last week. He looked good. He was on a little bit of a pitch count. Not the highest upside game that we've seen from him, but he did score a touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to be like that over the next couple of weeks as he gets 100% healthy and back into game action. But it doesn't matter. If he plays, you play him. I honestly don't know how I've got a guy in green that has averaged 1 reception and 2.5 yards over his first 2 games of the year. But here we are with the tight end position and Pat Freiermuth, and I'm going to go with him against the Las Vegas Raiders, who defensively suck for the most part. The Raiders have given up the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end position this season. So Pat Freiermuth absolutely has the opportunity this week. And again, given the fact that they are banged up at the wide receiver position, although George Pickens looks fantastic, Pat Freiermuth has some touchdown upside. And hopefully that volume will finally come for him this week. Because you know what, Kenny Pickett? I need you looking towards the Muth, okay? Your offense isn't good right now. You guys can't figure it out. Get the Muth going, you get your offense going. And you can take a look at the numbers on the screen and just realize that if Pittsburgh allows the 9th fewest fantasy points to the tight end position, and you have 2 tight ends on your team with the stats that you see here on the screen, you don't play them in fantasy football. And that's what we have in Las Vegas. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to Dallas Goedert week. I think Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown actually both end up going off this week. Dallas Goedert, he hasn't seen the biggest plays and the biggest upside. Now, week 2 was a lot better than week 1, and week 2 still wasn't nearly as good as that we would have liked. But Tampa Bay, they're pretty good against the run. They're not that great against the pass, though. In fact, they're bottom 3rd against the pass and bottom 3rd in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. This is Dallas Goedert week. If there's ever going to be a week, it's going to be this week, just like I've mentioned with a couple of other tight ends. That's why I really feel like we're going to see the best week so far that we've had this season from the tight end position. We have some good matchups, and we've got some good tight ends in those matchups. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and I'm going to go with Dallas Goedert this week as a top 6 to 7 option. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles, they've been ripped apart by the pass the first 2 weeks of the season. 31st against the pass, and they've allowed the most fantasy points to the tight end position so far, which seems really odd to say given how good Philadelphia's defense has been. But Cade Otton, he's not the most upside for me. He's not even one of the safer plays, and he's probably closer to red than he is to green, but he's coming off a decent week. And given the fact that Philadelphia has had trouble against the pass, I'm going to go ahead and look at Cade Otton as a high-risk, high-reward type of player this week, that if he scores a touchdown, he's probably going to be in the top 10 tight ends for the week. Man, Tyler Higbee hasn't done a whole lot so far this season, but you have to assume that Cincinnati is going to game plan for Puka Nacua a lot better than what maybe the first 2 teams that faced them did. Now, is he still going to see a lot of targets? Probably, but maybe not as much as he has over the first couple of weeks. And if Puka doesn't see those targets, who are they automatically going to go to? I'm going to throw a bet down on Tyler Higbee because Cincinnati's been pretty good against the pass this season. So maybe not a huge upside day for Tyler Higbee in terms of volume, but they also have allowed quite a bit of points to the tight end position, which is where I would love to see Tyler Higbee get in the end zone this week. For Irv Smith Jr., we don't even know who his quarterback is going to be. In terms of targets, you've got T. Higgins, you've got Jamar Chase, you've got Tyler Boyd, and maybe even Joe Mixon right now. So unfortunately, Irv Smith Jr. is just not close to being high enough on the priority on his own team to be a priority on our fantasy team. There you go, Headliner Nation. My start and sit breakdown for the tight end position here in week 3. Make sure you hit that like button if you appreciate the content. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and stick around for the rest of the season. And most importantly, leave me a comment down below. Let me know one tight end that you think is a little bit overlooked right now that finishes inside the top 10 this week. Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here for today, though. Peace out, stay safe, and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
I'm a headliner.